Hello, my name is Justin Carbunco. I'm the team leader for the marketing operations part for Samsung Biologics, small contract manufacturing organization. So for this presentation, we're going to be talking about stainless steel and single-use systems and the key and technical economic considerations every drug developer must understand. So with the development of single-use systems for biomanufacturing, the lingering question has always been, which is better, single use or stainless steel? For anyone that has looked into this topic, the answer is not clearly black and white. In this presentation, we'll focus on the cost comparisons for stainless steel and single-use systems and some considerations for companies that are looking into clinical and contract manufacturing, either through implementation or through looking on who to hire for their product. So to go over some of the list of contents that we'll be going over, first part, we'll be taking a look at the good debate, single use or stainless steel. Next, we'll move forward into some key considerations to make decisions. So capacity, scalability, flexibility, cost, and also supply chain management. Further into the slides, we're going to take a closer look into the cost considerations that companies or clients might need to consider. And then we'll further go into the supply chain management, specifically within our time, just because of what's been going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we'll finally end the presentation with how Samsung Biologics can support you and your decisions. Okay. So the good debate. So if you take a look from single-use systems, the current trend nowadays has been that implementation of single-use systems. And from that business sense, it's been growing very rapidly. If you can take a look at the compound annual growth rate on the slide, it's been growing from about 12.8% with an annual 12 billion USD in 2019 and estimated to grow up to about 33 billion USD by 2027. The year growth rate as of 2020 has been about 10.85%. And if you take a look at the bioprocessing market share, you can tell that biopharmaceutical manufacturers operate at about over 60% approximately for the total market share. But something to consider for this too, and within that market share, is that the majority of single-use systems are used at small scale or clinical scale, with stainless steel being more prominent for anything above 2,000 liter capacity. Some of the key questions that we need to consider too in terms of single use and stainless steel is cost. So from a single use, very generically, operational cost tends to be a lot higher, with your implementation cost being a lot lower. Whereas with single use, your implementation cost is a lot higher, but your operational costs will tend to go down over time. Some of the other key factors for deciding single use or stainless steel comes with technical feasibility, economic feasibility, acceptable product risk or process risk, process continuity strategy, your implementation strategy, or just the logistic strategy of how to use the systems for your day-to-day operations. So now we'll move on to some of the key considerations when you need to make a decision in regards to single use and stainless steel. So the first topic that I kind of want to go over within the key considerations is capacity. So when we talk about capacity, we're talking about how much drugs that you can make at your facility. For pre-commercial, it's still, right now, it's dominated by single-use systems with over 85% utilization, especially within the upstream manufacturing. From upstream, when we're talking with the production bioreactors, titers have been seeing a larger growth rate over the last 10 to 15 years. Before we used to see grams per liter at less than 1 gram per liter, with current products nowadays averaging anywhere from 5 to 10 grams per liter. The implementation for single-use systems, though, hasn't really seen too much impact on the downstream methods, only because the percent growth in yields hasn't really changed that much in the last 10 to 15 years. From what we've seen, we've only seen about a 5% growth in yields. The other thing that we want to take a look at is the practicality of use, the practical use of these systems. So when we talk about single use, the current kind of sweet point that we're seeing right now is that at the 1,000 to 2,000 liter scale is we're seeing the most practical limit. Anything higher than that, feedback has been coming back in terms of it being very unwieldy and hard to install the systems for the day-to-day operations. However, as innovations come up and the technology is improved upon and refined, there is potential that for larger scale, single use will be further utilized. The next topic that we're going to talk about is scalability. So scalability is being able to scale your product from laboratory to maybe large scale productions. So single use right now is utilized very commonly with small capacity, with stainless steel still leading the charge in terms of large scale manufacturing just because of the benefits of reduction of cost to make your product. Stainless steel, just as an example, currently can average about $60 to $100 per gram for cost. The next topic we're going to kind of go over is flexibility. So when we talk about flexibility, it's talking about how to adapt one's product or process to a facility. So with single-use systems, right now it's primarily confined to mammalian cells in comparison to stainless steel, which can be utilized for both mammalian or microbial. The reason being is that in regards to, say, microbial, the demands for those products are a lot higher, specifically in temperature, pressure, and mix rates. So, and then we'll move on to costs. So actually with cost and supply chain management, I'll actually go further deeper into these two subjects in my later slides, but just to kind of highlight, when we're talking about costs, we're talking about cost of goods, labor, utilities, and also maybe incremental improvements and the such. When it comes to supply chain management, stainless, from what we've seen right now, stainless has been very less dependent on consumables, whereas with single-use systems, they're a lot more dependent on consumables. And then we'll also touch on that in my next couple slides. So moving on. So a closer look into cost considerations. So as I was going into my observations, I kind of split costs into three different categories. First one being physical cost, the next one being risk cost, and the last one being improvement or changeover cost. So as we're going into the physical cost, like I said before in my previous slide, we're talking about cost of goods. So that could be anything from, say, single-use filters to disposable bags. But as we know that with these cost of goods for consumables, as you keep using them, the cost does grow over time. The other thing to consider too is utility cost. This can be anything from, say, electricity, your CIP and SIP systems, and the such. And then the last one is implementation cost, being able to bring your equipment into the facility. With single-use systems, there tends to be a smaller footprint with these ones, so you are able to purchase more of these systems to kind of accommodate various different processes. Whereas stainless steel, it's a single implementation and it's really hard to make it a lot more modular. So the next cost we'll look into is risk costs. So this is anything from turnover time to risk of any types of contamination. So when we talk about contamination and cross-contamination, Single-use systems right now is the most effective way to eliminate cross-contamination from your product to product or from your batch to batch, just because of the nature of the system of being able to use it and then pretty much throw it away after you're complete. Whereas with stainless steel systems, you have to do a lot more to help to try to mitigate that risk through either CIPs, SIPs, pressure testing, and the like in order to help mitigate. However, when it comes to single-use systems, contaminations during processing are a lot harder to prevent and mitigate in terms of equipment damage. So whereas with stainless steel, the systems are a lot more robust, and it does offer the potential, not to eliminate completely, but at least the potential to save a batch as necessary. As an example, with the single-use systems, it's a lot harder to detect microbial damage or microscopic damage through just normal inspections and fit for uses. We typically have to rely on vendor FITs and their own internal inspections prior to shipping. Whereas with stainless steel systems, there are activities that we're able to perform to at least test the system to make sure that it's integral prior to use. One example is a pressure test on a vessel prior to SIP to make sure that the vessel is integral before it's being used. The next one that we'll look into is improvement and changeover cost. So when we're talking about improvement and changeover cost, it's switching over from system to system or actually upgrading your systems to accommodate maybe future technologies and advancements. The problem with this is that for some of the older companies that are there that still have stainless steel, it's probably not economically feasible for them to completely change over their entire process. And same thing vice versa with newer companies that maybe have implemented single-use systems but are considering larger scale systems. The cost is there in terms of additional validation, also more regulatory filings that might be impacted because you may have changed your process to a certain extent, additional testing for comparability, and then also the amount of work that would be necessary in order revising your documentation, such as your standard operating procedures. Okay, now we'll move on to supply chain management, closer look. Okay, so in regards to supply chain management, specifically targeting the entire event that happened with COVID-19 and pandemic. In regards to this, what we've seen is that our supply chain from the entire industry was severely impacted due to this. You had cases like social distancing, so manufacturers and vendors had to accommodate in order to help kind of work with the government recommendations in terms of manufacturing. So keeping distances, so that may have required people to reduce work hours, reduce manpower in certain areas just because of just the being nearby people. So you had to make sure they were farther away from each other. And we also seen people working from home. That's one of the biggest things that we've seen, especially in like the US. People working from home and only essential people needing to be there. So some of the things that we've also seen is a hoarding mentality. And that's kind of compounded into the higher demand in terms of consumables from the vendors. We've seen people ordering a lot more consumables in order to make sure that their production and manufacturing schedules are not impacted. But because this is happening industry-wide, the vendors, there's such a higher demand and the supply is just not there. So lead times have been increasing, where an average lead time for consumables was anywhere from 3 to 4 months. We're seeing more 5 to 6 months or even longer. And then ordering of, like, say, brand new equipment, average lead time was 5 to 6 months, but now we're seeing lead times of up to a year, depending on who you're working with. One of the things we want to take a look at too in regards to supply chain management is in terms of what Samsung has done. So from what we've done as a company, we developed a task force to kind of look into the situation, to keep tabs on it, to risk assess what are critical gaps that we're having in our supply chain in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. Building up strategies, forecasting certain events, taking a look at our schedule longer and longer down the road to make sure that we're strategizing when to order when appropriate with the given lead times as well. All right. And then on my final slide here. Okay, so Samsung Biologics and how we can support you. So just a little background on my company that I work for. So again, I work for the manufacturing operations side for a small contract manufacturing organization for Samsung Biologics. Our current capacity right now is we have 2 1,000 stainless steel production bioreactors and also 2 single-use 1,000 liter production bioreactors. So we have both technologies in terms of stainless steel and single use. We also work hand in hand with our contract development organization and our large scale contract manufacturing organization to be able to accommodate clients' processes either through development all the way up to large scale manufacturing. What this entails is that for, say, a client who has kind of the question on whether to do stainless steel or single use, at least this information that was provided will help make that decision. And if it doesn't seem feasible at that time, you can definitely come to us and we can accommodate pretty much most any scenario just because we utilize both technologies here. And we'll work with you to kind of determine what we think and what would probably be the best fit for your product. Okay. And finally, I just want to plug our virtual exhibition hall. So we do have a virtual exhibition hall, so please come out and visit. The link is in the slide below. It's the exhibition.samsungbiologics.com. So please check us out. And then my final slide is I just want to give proper reference to the authors and the documents that I had utilized as part of my research for this presentation. You can take a look at the slide here to see which documents were read and as part of my own observations within the industry and within my own company as well. As far as contact informations, I will include that on the last slide. And please contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.